Jane Jameson, and I'm Program Manager of PF, the Public-Private Infrastructure Advisory Facility. Really delighted today to be moderating this session on the role of contract management in building stronger PPP institutions. This is the third in a series of webinars we've been holding as part of our broader program of how do we build stronger PPP institutions. Together with the PPP group of the World Bank, we've been really digging into what are some of the drivers of success of PPP programs and how we as development institutions can really help support governments in accelerating access to through infrastructure through their PPP programs. So this has been we'll be able to share more of the broader work on this. We've looked at capacity building, we've looked at project preparation, and now we're looking at perhaps one of the areas that's potentially overlooked, although is absolutely critical to the long-term sustainability of PPPs, is the contract management. Everyone gets very excited about getting to financial close on a project, but actually that's where the rubber hits the road for the 20-year concession that you have to implement. So this is a very critical topic that I think sometimes we don't spend enough time focusing on. So I'm really glad that we've brought together some great experience on the topic and to really explore how we can make sure PPPs are a success in the long term. Just a few housekeepings, just to let you all know that this is being recorded and we'll be sharing it on our website. And also, as we go through, if you'd like to add comments or questions.
This meeting is being recorded.
There you go. This meeting's being recorded. And if you'd like to add comments, questions as we go, please put them in the chat and we'll open up for discussion at the end. So with no further ado, I shall pass to my good friend and colleague, Ajaz Ahmed, who's acting director. I've promoted him there, acting practice manager for the PPP group of the World Bank. So Ajaz, over to you.
Thanks for the promotion. And thanks for putting things in context. Colleagues, welcome to today's event on a very critical topic, like Jane mentioned. A few quick points from my side. We know that infrastructure financing gap is in trillions, right? So there is no choice but to leverage private capital. The World Bank Group recognizes this, which is why in its new corporate scorecard, one of the 15 outcome areas is on more private investment, with indicators on private capital enabled or PCE and private capital mobilized or PCM. And as with other indicators in the corporate scorecard, PCM and PCE outcomes are expected to be mainstreamed through everything we do, country partnership frameworks, global challenge programs, and all the operations. So PPPs will play an important role in addressing this financing gap for obvious reasons, as we know. At the PPP group in IPG, we provide private capital enabling support through building conducive PPP ecosystems, as well as on innovative use of our investment financing to promote hybrid PPPs, basically through providing viability gap fund to improve project affordability and bankability. This is supported by our analytics, global databases, tools, diagnostics, and guidance notes. So in addition to our advisory and technical assistance support on PPPs, IBRD IDA operations have produced about 14% of the total PCM through PPPs. So there's a lot of room to improve over here. Alongside developing bankable pipeline of projects, we need to equally make sure that our clients have the means to manage contracts that they sign. On average, governments have already spent about 3 to 5% of project cost before they reach commercial close. But many fail to properly budget and resource the contract management function to ensure on-time, on-budget delivery of desired KPIs and outcomes during the life of the project. As good practice, the government of South Africa does not allow a contracting authority to sign a PPP contract unless it proves that it has the budget and resources to manage the contract. One of the tools that you'll hear about today is our PPP contract management tool, or 3PCMT. I would also like to quickly draw your attention to two other support resources. One is on the guidance on PPP legal frameworks, and the other is our benchmarking of infrastructure development. So guidance on PPP legal frameworks has a whole chapter on contract management, providing guidance on the process of managing, monitoring, and administrating the PPP contract and related documents from contract signatures through to the end of contract and handback of the asset to the contracting authority, including things that can go into legal frameworks versus PPP contracts. And I have my colleague Editun over here, who was very much part of developing all of this. It contains guiding principles on what constitutes a contract management framework and how to bring flexibility in addressing disruptions or changes which are unforeseen in the contracts. The other resource is our benchmarking infrastructure development, or BID. The benchmarking for 2023 shows that about 80% of the surveyed economies only adopt about half of the contract management practices, but nonetheless important ones such as enforcing arbitration awards, prohibiting unilateral contract amendments, regulating PPP contract modification, and the like. However, it is to be noted that a far less significant number of economies have adopted good practices of disclosing contract management information to the public. So we circle back to our PPP contract management tool, which can also help with proper disclosure of information. It is comprehensive, intuitive, and user-friendly, and you will hear more about it this morning, and look forward to the discussion today.
Great, thanks, Ajaz. So let's kick off. I will pass over to our colleague Kerry Farley from IRIS and Infrastructure Advisory. Kerry has been a partner with us on the whole PPP Institutions program over the last few years, and will share some of the lessons learned and practices that we've identified through this program. So maybe pass to you, Kerry, to set the scene for this work.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jane. Let me share my screen. There are my slides coming through. Great. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Kerry Farley, and I've been working supporting governments on PPP and infrastructure development and advising on PPP transactions and PPP institutional and regulatory reform for over 20 years. And as Jane mentioned, recently I've been working with the World Bank as it explores how to best support PPP institutions to drive successful PPP programs. The work that we undertook really had two main components. The first looked at researching PPP programs globally to identify factors linked with their success. And the second stage of the work involved a review of technical assistance to PPP institutions. And the goal of this review was to determine whether the success factors we identified were actually reflected in the typical technical assistance provided to developing country governments. The work covered a wide range of topics, one of which included PPP contract management. And today, as the World Bank is disseminating other contract management tools, we're here to share some of our findings on how PPP contract management may impact PPP program development, and in turn, how development partners can best support PPP contract management. So first, I'll talk just a little bit about what we can say about the importance of contract management. Something everyone just mentioned is how important it is. And certainly effective contract management is considered central to ensuring individual PPP projects deliver their intended value for money to governments and end users. It's often referenced as being as important as ensuring the quality of the PPP contract itself. However, although there's wide recognition of its importance, there's very limited research that clearly links positive PPP project outcomes or broader PPP program growth to specific contract management practices. As a result, the perception of the importance of contract management is largely based on an understanding of the impact that actions taken during contract management can have on a PPP project. And these impacts arise through two main channels. The first are significant events, and these are the events that we tend to think of when we think about contract management: renegotiations, disputes, force majeure events. These are events which, by definition, have the potential to result in material changes to the risk allocation of a PPP contract. Although these events may seem rare, experience suggests that they're actually relatively common and that most PPP projects will need to navigate one or more over their lives. However, significant events are not the only events or not the only activities that need to be managed that have the potential to reshape the allocation of risks between contracting parties. Day-to-day contract management, which tends to involve much more routine monitoring of services, reports, payments, these can also impact risk allocation. For example, a consistent failure to enforce contractual requirements or to impose contractual penalties can shift risks back onto the public sector. And this tends to happen more frequently where capacity is low. So, although managing contract management is important, that doesn't mean that managing contracts effectively is straightforward. General research indicates that it requires considerable capacity. Managing significant events in particular, it often requires the specialist PPP and financial and legal expertise. This is sometimes similar to the expertise that's retained to support PPP project preparation. However, contracts are generally managed by contracting authorities who may not possess these skill sets. And in many cases, central PPP institutions may also need to obtain external support if they are to assist. Capacity needs in contract management are often near-term and urgent. In many cases, significant events might arise quickly and they need to be managed within contractually mandated timeframes, making it difficult to bring on external resources if needed. Studies of contract management in developed countries have highlighted that deploying the right expertise flexibly on a just-in-time basis has proven to be a challenge for many governments. The UK National Audit Office specifically noted that a lack of commercial skills puts the public sector at a disadvantage in the negotiation and management of contracts. And it also highlighted the risk that important knowledge may not be passed on when advisors or key individuals move on to other work. This acknowledges the particular challenges that governments face in both building and also retaining institutional capacity over the long lives of PPP projects. However, it's hard to identify how best to help developing country governments, because there are few studies of contract management practice across developing countries. Most detailed studies focus on specific cases, which are predominantly in more developed jurisdictions. So the challenges that are most relevant for countries at different stages of development aren't necessarily clear. Complicating the picture is the fact that contract management is generally managed by contracting authorities, and capacity across these institutions varies widely, with some contracting authorities responsible for hundreds of PPPs, while others may only have one. Central PPP institutions are also not often engaged. Although most are mandated to provide capacity support across the PPP project cycle, other findings from our institution's work show that contracting authorities do not often seek the involvement of central PPP institutions unless they're required to do so. The approval of amendments to PPP contracts, the one area where there does tend to be some oversight over contract management activity, is still only required in half the jurisdictions where the World Bank's benchmarking infrastructure of the jurisdictions surveyed in the World Bank's infrastructure, benchmarking infrastructure work. So overall, it's far from clear exactly what support different contracting authorities might require, or how to channel that support given the lack of engagement of central PPP institutions in many cases. Despite both the importance of managing PPP contracts and the challenges that seem to be experienced by governments in doing so, this part of the PPP project cycle has been the subject of far less development partner support as compared to PPP framework development or PPP project preparation, something Jane referred to. In terms of guidance, many general PPP guidebooks include a section on contract management. Historically, this has been relatively brief and hasn't provided much in the way of guidance that could actually support practitioners. Detailed guidance has often only been found relative to specific issues like FCCL, where guidance has been developed covering the spectrum of the PPP project lifecycle. More recent general publications, however, are capturing increasing content on contract management, and there are now several resources devoted exclusively to contract management issues, and this includes two that you'll hear more about shortly. Outside of guidance and tools, other technical assistance has actually been more limited than what we've seen in the area of guidance and tools. Capacity building has not historically focused on contract management, and PPP country assessments and diagnostics often only include a cursory review of operational PPPs. So there is often little assessment of the effectiveness of post-award project governance or contract management practice. The support that has been provided has largely been done on an ad hoc basis where specific issues have arisen during project implementation. This support has been highly relevant for individual contracting authorities, but less relevant for central PPP institutions, and it's also difficult to replicate. So it's not a tool that development partners can easily roll out across a wide range of different developing country governments. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has really focused attention on the importance of the management of a country's PPP portfolio, particularly with respect to FCCL, and development partners are considering new ways to support PPP institutions, but more information and new approaches are clearly needed. So overall, although we couldn't clearly link contract management practice to successful PPP programs or program growth, it does seem clear that contract management is critical for PPP project outcomes. As a result, PPP institutions should not stop focusing on PPP projects once financial close is achieved. Although their role may be more limited during contract management, there are still steps they can take to improve contract management practices. They can support contract management capacity building. They can develop approaches to rapidly access external expertise when it's needed. And they can help ensure that PPP frameworks enable appropriate oversight of contract management activities. Development partners should continue to increase their focus on contract management. First and foremost, this should include routinely incorporating contract management and PPP assessments and capacity building activities. But also, this is an area where we need to learn more, and continuing to solicit feedback from PPP institutions and contracting authorities on the support they need is also an important part of that. And perhaps during the practitioners' perspectives later in the session today, we might hear from some developing country governments on how development partners can continue to support PPPs after financial close. Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry. And I think, really setting the scene for some of the deep drilling down into some of the tools today. I think you've heard from Kerry the importance of building government capacity for contract management and governments having the right resources. So I'm delighted that we can have a deep dive into one of those resources that's been developed by the World Bank Group on the contract management portfolio management systems. Delighted that Amandeep Singh, international PPP expert who's been working with us on developing this tool, is able to join us today. And I'll pass over to Amandeep to walk through the contract management tool. So over to you, Amandeep.
Thank you, Jane. Let me share my slides. You can see the slides, please.
Yep. Yes, thanks.
Thank you. All right. I think the stage has been set really good. And as we know, PPPs are another form of procuring public services, and it can, give benefits only and only if all the stages of PPP lifecycle are managed pretty well, right from the suitable project selection to project preparation, structuring, procurement, and finally the contract management. And as Jane mentioned in the beginning, that this is contract management in PPP is one of the most overlooked part of the whole system. In view of that, the World Bank has developed this web-enabled tool to manage PPP contracts effectively and efficiently, and formerly known as Contract Management and PPP Portfolio Management System, 3PCMT as we call it. And this is designed basically to support public authorities, the MDAs, the contracting authorities, to manage and monitor individual PPP contracts, and help centralized agencies like PPP units, PPP regulators to monitor at the portfolio level to, help them looking at how the PPP works and budgeting and other aspects, FCCL, to manage it well. Now, on the public authorities like MDAs and CAs, it's right from the commercial close to the handback of the early termination, all the commercial close activities, right from the signing of the contract project scheduling, all the condition precedents from the both parties, various parties, financial closure and FCCL at the financial closure are looked into by this tool. Construction phase, O&M phase with KPI monitoring and the payment mechanism. and also if there is any capacity addition to the project that has been looked into by this tool. And more specifically, the climate change aspects, including GHG emission monitoring from the projects and at the portfolio level. Both are being looked at by this tool and then by handback or the expiry or termination of the project. And exceptional events like renegotiations, compensation relief events, force majeure, dispute, arbitration, etc., also being looked at by tool, and cross-cutting issues, FCCL, which is most important, appointments of external advisors, experts, etc. Everything is in comprehensively. This tool is being looked into. And then that portfolio level, the MIS of the projects, to help central agencies look at the portfolio, how the PPP is working in their country or in the region. It helps to look at the projects from different PPP types, stage breakup, investment value, investment visualizers, how the financing mix. I just mentioned about the government support, viability gap funding, how it is working, and consolidated KPI performance at the PPP portfolio level, payment requirements which support governments in budgeting for PPPs, performance monitoring, and portfolios with alerts on the non-compliant projects. And then it helps governments and stakeholders to deep dive into non-compliant projects and look into how to manage it. It's a kind of a proactive approach. Indicators for identifying areas of concerns, triggering interventions through alerts to the relevant authorities, and reduce probability of defaults on PPP. That's why PPP contract management, as Kerry has mentioned, is way more important. And collect information for data analysis on all PPPs, and then based on the analysis, going to course correct PPPs and support assessment on contingent liabilities coming from the PPPs. Value proposition of this tool, it's a comprehensive, includes each and every stage for project implementation starting commercial close. Most importantly, provides wider visibility of PPP performance. Normally, most in the developing world, PPPs are managed at the department level and sometimes at the very local project manager level, and it doesn't have a wider visibility. So this tool allows to give wider visibility, create alerts, asking for time, giving timelines to manage those risks, and proactive approach to avoid any defaults, which is it's a win-win situation for both private and public partners. This tool supports ESG requirements, right from climate resilience, right each and every stage, sustainability and tracking GHG emissions. Includes learning resources for users, various aspects might be especially for the climate, right? Or any other aspect, FCCL, how to calculate FCCL, how to monitor. For all important aspects, there are learning resources on this tool for users to look at. It's a web-enabled with multiple users. 10 users can be created with the organizations, 4 levels and 3 access rights. Clear and functional user interface allows users, the stakeholders, for example, the public authority, the PPP unit, or even independent expert, to communicate with each other through this tool. Dashboards with high-level information on portfolio as well as project level. Flexibility to customize. So this tool need to be flexible, need to be customized from country to country as per their framework or the institutional framework. So it has a flexibility to customize. To be hosted on government's nominated server for exclusivity, and interface with the other applications like PSAT or the PFRAM. So that's how it allows and easy to maintain the system architecture. Few exclusions from this tool. This tool is not a substitute for contract management institutions like, for example, project management team, project manager, or for that matter, independent expert. However, it helps users or the project management teams manage projects and the contract in a very efficient and effective manner. This tool does not also eliminate the drawbacks of poorly drafted PPP contracts, right? So efficiently and internationally best practices drafted PPP contract will use most of the functionality of this tool. And this tool does not verify the information provided by the users. So that's a critical aspect. And so the information provided on each and every project and need to be verified. And this tool allows and gives gateway process on the information which has been entered into. So there are various gateways to see whether the information is provided correctly or not. So that tool allows that gateway process, because the basic information on the project is a foundation, and later on important for managing the projects. Now, structure of the 3PCMT, it has a project dashboard. So right from the contract information on the commercial close about the project info, contract management, condition precedents, financial closure, FCCLs, early works wherever applicable. Construction phase, the scheduling, quality monitoring, performance monitoring. Operation and maintenance phase, tracking performance, which is again lacking in overlooked most of the times. Payment mechanism, payments, contractual extensions of O&M, and at the end, handback. And expiry, like handback requirement, handback checklist, defect liability, those aspects. Each stage has its tool provides scheduler activities under each stage to monitor and to create alerts also. And there are cross-cutting aspects which tool looks into: the performance bonds, insurances, FCCL, communication, audit, and learning resources. And then the climate change aspects, both mitigation and adaptation aspects, are looked at each and every stage, and for monitoring GHG emissions also. And then the critical issues are being raised to the relevant authority levels. Then there's the action log, what action has been taken on that critical issue. The time-bound resolution, you can set that time to resolve a particular critical issue. There are exceptional events, for example, composition events or the termination defaults are coming. How to manage, where to manage, which authority to be escalated, fast-track dispute, arbitration, and finally termination. And finally, that portfolio level dashboard, which also includes the GHG emission status. To initialize this tool, first a user need to institutionalize the contract management, set up its institutional arrangement, defining their institution levels, roles, project managers, access. And the project management plans need to be ready for the project, like project management team plans for each and every stage, right, during construction, CP, O&M, KPI monitoring, etc. Then initialize the tool by registering the agencies, various institutions like contracting agency, PPP unit, independent expert, PPP regulators. Register the projects, register users, and assign project rights to the relevant users. Then simply log in through the login access and use the tool. 4 levels of institutional arrangement this tool provides: one at the project level, both at the field level and the supervisory level on the public authority side. And other project participants like lenders, development institutions, independent experts, and regulators. Then second level is the line ministry or the sector level, which looks at the management of the sector portfolio, sector level approvals. Then the database manager, very important, monitoring of PPP database, tracking data compliance, coordinating with the various stakeholders, and facilitating and supporting the PPP regulator. And finally, the PPP regulator who looks inspects and looks at the progress at the PPP as a portfolio. Administrator for the tool plays a key role, because how to set up the various institutions, whom to provide what kind of access, it's all administrator of the tool does. So that's very important. And to look at the workflow of the tool, after registration of the agencies and the projects, first the project information need to be entered. Agreement related information, project schedules, performance bonds, teams, and all those aspects need to be included. And then condition precedent aspects, the construction schedules, performance monitoring. Similarly for the O&M and handback information, and then the monitoring and exceptions like escalate unresolved issues, critical issues, resolve any as per agreement. So this is a one-time information one for the project need to be entered in this flow and then to use for the users. This slide basically provides the various tabs this tool has under each and every aspect, like the broader dashboard. It's a portfolio level, which provides these tabs: portfolio mix, investment, filters about the PPP types, then GHG emissions. Similarly for the project level, right from the project dashboard to each and every stage of the PPP, including GHG tracker, and then the quick links, like KPI, how the KPIs are performing for individual project or at the portfolio level, and then the learning resources. These are the few dashboards we will portfolio level, investment level, alerts, how the alerts are being provided, and then the GHG emission. We will look at that, quickly walk through the tool. This is the project screen. The project, you have the project list and then the each and every stage of the project, various tabs. Like for this tab is for the commercial close, and this is the various horizontal tabs for this particular stage to look at. And then these are the quick access. For example, you want to see user want to see the how O&M or the performance of the project. So simply click the KPI, look at, there are tool sets, the various levels, whether it's a fair, good, or really alarming situation of the performance. So it gives also the details, where and how and who is responsible. So these are some learning resources tabs, screens, which provides on the glossary useful links, references, climate aspects in the user guide. On the GHG emission tracker, this tool allows to monitor scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions here, and also the offsets, how the offsets are working, and then the total carbon dioxide equivalent emissions and the net carbon dioxide equivalent emissions, and then it checked with the baseline, which is set upfront. The baseline can be both static or dynamic. So it gives a reference how the project is performing against the baseline, and then tool allows to set the net neutrality targets that then like this one, and to see how the project is moving towards the net neutrality targets. So that was at the project level. This is at the portfolio level, which shows GHG emission both without offsets and with offsets. And these are the 5 stages or status which GHG emission, like category 1 carbon negative, carbon neutral, then category 3, 4, and 5. And you click a segment, then you go to the list of the project, then it shows the overall GHG emission of the portfolio. That overall status is the overall portfolio is pegging at the category 4. Just for you to look at, this is the tools front page, and once you log in, this gives you the dashboard on the how many total projects, total investment, which sector is the highest investment, then the as per numbers you can see the and the investment type, financing mix, PPP type, like whether it's user pay or the government pay, how many government pay, how many user pay, then investment, entire portfolio. You can look at the sector level, PPP type, financing mix. Similarly for GHG emissions, as we see, you go, and then these are the 5 projects which are without offset, which are category 5, and then you see which category 5 project and click it. It gives the details of the project and why it is at critical situation. Similarly, KPIs, O&M performance status, alarming. For example, here the 7 projects having alarming status and 2 projects having good status. There's a, then you click project and then see why it is so. Similarly, if you go to the project list, then it's similarly going to the project, and then you look at these tabs what we have discussed earlier. Thank you so much. And
thank you, Amandeep. Thank you for that really fascinating presentation, a really practical guide that I think can really help contracting authorities and PPP units really monitor the portfolio of projects. And I think very interesting to see that the GHG tracker, which is also very critical in really seeing the impact of some of our projects. The team is just putting into the chat how you can access this tool. It is open access, and we are piloting it in Nigeria and a number of other countries. We're looking at expanding the use of the tool. So wanted to share that with you. So for moving from that one tool, we're moving over to a second set of tools and resources that have been developed by the Global Infrastructure Hub. Actually, as a side note, I'm really delighted to have this presentation today because, as many of you may know, the Global Infrastructure Hub has been a global knowledge platform for data and partnerships around infrastructure over the last 10 years as an independent entity, and it's now actually moving to PF. So we're really delighted to have Sam, who's presenting here on the whole GIH team, joining PF. I think it's week 3 of Sam on the job with PF. We're going through a transition of integrating our work products and programs, and really excited to share this experience from the GIH. So as I mentioned, Sam Barr is now an infrastructure specialist with PF and formerly a director of knowledge mobilization for the Global Infrastructure Hub. So over to you, Sam, to talk a little bit about your tools and resources.
Thank you, Jane. And we're also very, very happy to be part of the team as well. So it's great to be on board. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, wherever they are in the world. One of the things I've noticed, I think so far, I'll be speaking to our contract management tool, but I think something that's really encouraging, I suppose, is that I think as I go through this session, I think people will see a lot of consistency between what I'm saying, what Amandeep is saying, and what Carrie was saying in terms of what are leading practices. So it's good that there's consistency and sort of a source of truth about what best practice is in the sector. And it's also really fantastic to see so many people online. I think some of the other presenters mentioned that this is a really, really important part of the PPP process, but it probably doesn't get as much attention potentially as some of other aspects of the PPP process. So our tool, our online tool, it's available. I'll put the website in the chat after this session, but it's available at the gihub.org website. It's broken up into 6 sections that basically go into detail about specific leading practices. So they run all the way from things that you would do before financial close in relation to contract management, things like setting up the procuring team and particularly setting them up in a way that gives them a sort of setting them up for success into the future. Then it also goes into routine contract management, so day-to-day management of a contract, both in operations and in construction. And then it also has sections on specific events. So we talk about how to manage renegotiation, how to deal with disputes, what to do in case of insolvency, and also how to work with the unfortunate event of a default and or termination. We also have a library of case studies that's associated with the tool. They're also available online where we deep dive into specific issues in specific sectors and jurisdictions. And we also have some data insights, which I'll be going through in a little bit more detail. So today's focus, we've got a finite amount of time, so I wanted to focus in on just a few sections to give people an idea of what the tool can do and what's available. I'm going to have a look at a couple of data insights which you might find interesting. It'll just be a very brief look, and I'd encourage folks to have a look at the online tool where you can find a significant more amount of information and some really interesting data insights. Then I'm going to go into a couple of those events that I spoke about. I thought it would be kind of good to pick a couple of things that tend to bookend a contract. So one of those is setting up a procuring team. And we've got quite a bit of detailed advice about how you can to do that and also to manage the procuring team once it has been put in place. And then, moving on to something that would happen at the end of a contract by definition, talking about default and termination. So I'm going to start off with data insights, and I do have a couple of data insights that I wanted to show you. But before we go into that, I'll give you a bit of an insight into how we actually created the contract management tool. Initially, we kicked it off by creating a master database of, I think it was about 3,700 projects from around the world. Then from there, we selected 250 PPPs to go into more detail and to perform some data collection on. The data came from a variety of different sources, from desktop research through to existing PPP databases, through to the actual project proponents themselves. And it's quite a rich data set. You can actually download that data set online as well. It covers a range of regions. So we've got example projects from every region. We've got example projects from a range of national income levels. And we also have example projects across a range of sectors. After we performed the data collection, we then went into developing some case studies. And for those who know me, I never tire of extolling the virtues of case studies. It's something that the Hub have developed many of over the years. And as a practitioner, I certainly find case studies extremely helpful, not just in developing policies and working on projects, but also they can be very compelling when being presented to decision makers at decision points. From there, and I think this is another really important point, is we carried out three quite large workshops around the world. And the reason for that is we didn't want this to be just a tool that we created in-house. The concept behind the tool is it's very much created by infrastructure practitioners for infrastructure practitioners. So I think that the end result of that has therefore been that we wanted this to be something that was very much fixed in the real world, that addressed genuine pain points that practitioners had, and showcased genuine solutions that practitioners had been able to implement. So I'm going to go now into a couple of interesting little data insights, and there's quite a few of these in the actual tool, but I'm just going to focus on two today, and perhaps the implications of these data insights. So you can see here we've got what the causes of renegotiations are in contracts across the cohort of PPP projects that we looked at. And there's myriad causes of renegotiation, and everything from wrong demand forecasts all the way through to things like project company surplus profit. But the three causes that drive over 50% of renegotiation, the first one is increased construction costs. I think everyone would agree that we're in a fairly high cost environment at the moment, and that's something that we've seen right around the world. And it's sort of a market impact that you just have to deal with, I suppose, in terms of renegotiations. There's not a lot you can do to manage that risk. So I'd like to focus then in on numbers 2 and 3. So government policy change and change in tariff regulation. And what's interesting about these two is that they relate specifically to government activity. And so what that means, I guess, is that a significant amount of renegotiation, upwards of around the 30% mark, over 30%, is actually driven by changes that the government's making. And that's not to suggest that governments shouldn't change policies and shouldn't change regulations, but I think the implication of this is that it's really important to be cognizant of the impact that these changes can have on your contracts, on your existing contracts, and potentially even on future contracts in terms of sovereign risk and access to finance in the future. A second point that I wanted to draw out was related to disputes. And you can see here on the left-hand side, this is, according to the data that we have, this is how disputes have been actually resolved. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the dispute resolution methods that have been designed in the contracts. And I guess what's important to demonstrate here is only 13% of disputes are resolved by negotiation, and the remaining 87% are decided, essentially they require a third party to resolve. And that can mean anything from arbitration to mediation, all the way through to the legal system, with courts deciding about 40% of, or resolving about 40% of these disputes. And so I guess the implication of this in terms of data insights is that it can make a lot of sense to include your preferred data dispute resolution methods in contracts from the outset, if possible. So that's just a few of the data insights. Like I said, there's many more on the webpage, but obviously time precludes us going into them in great detail here. Now I'm going to touch on a few of the leading practices, and this is probably where the bulk of the tool lies. It's several hundred pages in the PDF version, and there's also a digital version which allows you to kind of quickly navigate and find a lot of these solutions and a lot of these pieces of advice. So the first one is setting up a procuring team, and I think this is something I think that probably doesn't get as much attention as it should, because it's really is fundamental, having the right people with the right blend of skills and the right blend of experience on a procuring team. We've got two elements to this. One is the team setup, so the original hiring and setting up the strategy and how big the team will be. And then the second part of that is how do you really set them up for success by managing their ongoing training and development. So in terms of team setup, one of the things that will obviously be driven by the size of the project and available resources. In terms of the timing, it's something that you would want to do before the financial close. One of the things that's really important, I think, is the skill set and the competencies. So we tend to focus a lot on, in these procuring teams, on technical skills, and they're very important. But I think it's also really important to get particularly sort of senior managers and project managers who do have a good skill set in terms of those softer skills, things like negotiation, things like relationship management, because it's incredibly important that you have the right sort of blend of personalities as well as people with the right technical skills. And then the other sort of really important point I'd make here is these teams typically tend to be they're often quite small, and so there's not a lot of redundancy built into them. It's difficult to sort of pick up when there's staff turnover, and you really need to sort of actively manage the roster, actively plan for staff turnover, and most importantly, given these are new sort of organisations, it's really important to have a process for passing on corporate knowledge, even when you do have staff turnover. Going to the point now of training and development, you can really support that through developing a formal training program. And again, I think the idea there is that you really want to focus both on technical skills. I think in my experience, people have typically come from either the legal fraternity, lawyers, or from the built environment, so engineers and the like, and then, as in my case, economists and finance professionals. So it's important to be able to help people from those various disciplines to be able to skill themselves up in areas that they're not necessarily familiar with in a technical sense. But again, it's also really important to have a focus on those soft skills like negotiation and relationship management training and getting more exposure, so you create a pipeline of talented people across a range of projects. And to support that, you can look to pull in appropriate external resources to deliver training, and that's somewhere where I think development banks can help have an impact. And then also consider developing a PPP contract management manual, and that's one of those things that will help you sort of establish that baseline of corporate knowledge that I mentioned before. So moving on now to what things that might happen at the end of a contract in terms of contract management. And I've grouped these. We've got quite a selection of these in the actual tool itself, but I've grouped them into sort of 5 core themes. Remembering again that within the actual tool, you can sort of drill down into these to get a significant amount more detail. But today is obviously just about giving people an overview and an understanding of how the tool works. I think the first aspect, considering financial implications of default and termination, is, I think, fairly intuitive. But I think it's also very, very important to consider non-financial implications. And in that sort of circumstance, what I'm talking about is often, for instance, political implications. Anytime a government, signs a contract with a private provider, it becomes an inherently political situation. And when that contract defaults or terminates, again, political considerations are going to be very important. So it's important for us to, as contract managers, to be cognizant that there are non-financial as well as important financial implications around default and termination. Secondly, I'll bundle a few of these together. It's really important to follow fairly precisely the termination and pre-termination procedures, as well as be very aware of what step and rights you do and don't have. And that leads me to this middle section here, which is it's very prudent, I think, to get early legal advice when you're considering a default or a termination situation. Very, very important, because there are a lot of, it's quite a detailed process and a lot of things have to be stepped through. And you do, as far as possible, want to limit liability. And then finally, substitute project companies, whether or not you're considering re-tendering the project or whether you would take it on as a government yourself, is another consideration that you have to look through. And again, these things are all developed in much more detail in the online tool. So I'll finish up there. I think we may have some time for questions at the end, which but feel free to get in touch with me. It's sbar@worldbank.org. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have outside of this session. But once again, thank you all so much for your time, and it's fantastic to see so many of you here. Have a great morning.
Thanks very much, Sam, and thanks for staying up late in Australia to join us. Maybe you could put the link to the tool in the chat so everyone can see what you're talking about, because I think there's some really rich experience in that tool that I think we could definitely drill down into and talk about a little bit more. So I think we've heard sort of global experience consolidated into tools and knowledge, but I think what we really want to do is hear from the practitioners. So people who have been implementing PPP projects and programs, and really will be opening up for questions shortly. So please do be ready to share your experiences. But I'm delighted to have Assistant Secretary Elazar Ricote from the who's Deputy Executive Director of the PPP Center of the National Economic Development Authority in the Philippines, to share his experiences and lessons learned. I think it'd be great to get for the Philippines experience. The Philippines has a very long history of PPP projects and programs, and I think has seen many projects right to the very end of the PPP cycle. So I think we'll have some very, very relevant experience to share here from a very mature PPP program. So over to you, Elazar. Thank you for joining us today.
Very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. An honor for you to have the Philippines share our, let's say, modest experience, a work in progress that we have with our PPP program. Can you see my slides? Hello? Can you see my slides now?
We don't yet.
Wait. Let me share that now.
Yes, it's just coming up. Okay, we have them. Yes, thank you.
Okay, wait, I'll just put it up. Wait, sorry. Apologies, sorry. There it is. Can you see it now?
Perfect, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's 8:30 in the evening or 9:30 in the evening in the Philippines. But again, thank you for inviting us. An honor to be sharing our experience. As you see, the Philippines is, I think, the first in the region, the Southeast Asian region, to have put together a PPP program, formalized a law in BOTs in the early 90s, and now we have a newly enacted PPP law, which consolidates all the lessons we've had over the years, and of course, the lessons from our neighbors in the region. I'm going to share to you some of our experience, some of our initiatives in our project monitoring and contract management work. First, the situation is that in the Philippines, there's a dedicated PPP agency, the PPP Center of the Philippines. We are established by law, so we have this solid authority to provide technical assistance, capacity building, and be the one to monitor and evaluate projects, all PPP projects all over the country. We have national agencies doing PPPs, SOE, state-owned enterprises, and even local governments. So we have that authority to monitor all of these projects all over the country. The law is very clear about our responsibility to be the overall monitoring and facilitation agency of the PPP program and all PPP projects. And this is provided for in the law that we should be conducting coordination and monitoring of all PPP projects, provide reports of the implementation of the projects to Congress. We report to the Congress and to the President, annual update or progress of these projects, the problems we've encountered, some of the challenges that we have encountered in these PPP projects all over the country. Also, the central repository of all PPP contracts. Our law requires all agencies getting into PPPs to submit and give a copy to us of the actual PPP contract. The itemized portion, or capacity building mandate and technical assistance, I put it here because it's also a platform for us to strengthen our monitoring mandate. For example, we have a capacity building mandate, so we do all kinds of training. So we're the go-to training institution. We have a unit for that. So we can incorporate already, as Sam mentioned a while ago, the importance of training, continuous capacity building. Once this monitoring implementation unit of that contracting entity has been set up, we start helping them with a customized training program for them on contract management and actual review of the project has been awarded, what they do, and also in the technical assistance that we provide, even policy formulation guidance we provide, we already incorporate the need for project monitoring and then contract management. For example, in the policy formulation support that we give them, we already include, or as a mandatory requirement in the board resolution that they'll have to create, or a local ordinance that they'll have to create, the creation of a PPP monitoring or implementation office or a unit to coordinate with us to secure training guidance from us. So very, synchronize, or we align our coordination monitoring mandate over all of these projects alongside our other mandates of capacity building, technical assistance. We have a dedicated project monitoring division in the center, which goes to all of these projects all over the country, which is a challenge, of course. We monitor risks and contingent liabilities arising from these PPP projects. We document best practices and lessons. We have a knowledge management team that receives all of this information and puts that into our manuals, documents, and even into our eventual training modules as lessons. We assist implementing agencies in identifying and resolving issues that may delay project implementation. Sam was right in pointing out the items or the issues later, default, termination, political events. So these are important things we track and monitor during the course of not just contract management, but the whole project implementation.
Like data with like variable.
Yes. We also, the PPP program in the Philippines, aside from the legal framework, the PPP law, we have a cabinet level team that does policy guidance and guidelines. We call them the PPP governing board. It's a cabinet level committee. They can issue policy circulars to supplement, add on to our legal framework, the law and the implementing rules. We have particularly put together a circular on monitoring protocols, monitoring framework and protocols. It somehow provides the details of who's going to monitor what, what's the role of the private partner, our PPP office, the monitoring team of that agency, the regulatory and oversight body. So kind of a crude version of Amandip's discussion earlier, the 4 level of institutional monitoring work. Alongside that, we have relevant circulars that also reinforce that work. Like we have, for example, a circular on managing affected employees, public consultation and engagement, mainstreaming the safeguards, environmental displacement, all of these things. So more instructive type rather than legal and very broad legal framework, but more instructive kind of circulars that our agencies can use and guide them with. Some of the lessons, having a dedicated management team is of course an obvious lesson there. The good thing about us is this law that requires that, to have a dedicated PPP contract management office. They are mandated to do oversight, centralized coordination of the implementation of the projects, proper documentation of project implementation actions and decisions, knowledge management and storage. As I said, we have a knowledge management team. We put together case studies, we put together lists of lessons, and we share that to the next team of transaction advisors, for example, facilitates documents recovery and verification of agreements, commitments, monitoring and tracking social and environmental safeguards. We have mandatory parameter terms and conditions, dispute resolution mechanisms, contract reopeners, and even a generic preferred risk allocation matrix. So all of these things we actually learned from experience all over the world. We've been looking at the PPIAF, the GIH for lessons and information. Development, another recent initiative that we're doing, development of a database of awarded PPP projects. As mentioned earlier, we've had the BOT law since the 90s. We have good and bad projects over the years. So we consolidate the information of the lessons from these projects. This serves as a central database where we can readily obtain information and learn from them. We have what we call implementation issues register. So we put together the issues that we've encountered and how they cause delay in the implementation, the kind of technical assistance provided, the recommendation or the opinion we made, for example, on the legal interpretation of a provision. All of this are documented and registered as a set of a database that our agencies can access. And finally, we're looking at a digitization of this report and submission so that we can have a more seamless way of gathering this information. We have agencies monitoring projects in various provinces all over the country. So it's important to have them get access to this information and collection of data and lessons. So real work in progress things that we are learning from the rest of the world, but consciously mindful of the the challenges of implementation. Lastly, we have, as you know, a facilities, a revolving fund that we have put together for the last 10 years. It aids our transaction advisor in project development for solicited and unsolicited. We have a panel of firms. One feature of that is we also hire to the fund independent consultant that we can hire during construction and operations phases of the project to document and assist and provide guidance to both parties. So in the end, just last slide, just to show how many projects we're working on. Lessons is that like Carrie's point a while ago, there are challenges. Location, some of the projects we're monitoring are all over the country and we can't be there very easily and quickly. Second is challenge of people moving, the people we trained, move on to another project, move to another agency, and the people who have been involved in the transaction and the contract drafting are not the same people or not familiar with the actual project during implementation. Of course, we need external help, and we're happy to have been assisted by ADB, Australian government, Canadian government, World Bank, even on our ongoing work of building our capacities here. The recent amended law also provided us some more teeth, some more authority. For example, now all unsolicited proposals, we have the first check, risk completeness. Now agencies will be mandated and will have some penalties if they don't share with us the contracts. So I think in summary, legal framework, solid legal framework, mandating monitoring, contract management is a real important requirement in all agencies doing PPPs and a central dedicated agency overseeing, consolidating all of that. That's the PPP Center. It's always a work in progress. That's why we are open to learning and we have technical assistance from various agencies, development partners helping us, and of course, the never-ending training. We have had capacity building training, water management from Carnegie Mellon in Australia and several other institutions. So as I said, it's a work in progress. We have had some projects that we understand we should do more in some of these projects, but we are learning as we go along. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Lizelle, for that really interesting presentation of your experience. I think, really good to see that very strong link between contract management and capacity building. Obviously, the challenges monitoring hands over to a contracting authority, how you make sure they have the tools to really oversee and manage the contract is obviously a key challenge, I guess, for implementation. So thank you for that. As everyone's been wonderfully on time, we have plenty of time for questions, comments, reflections. I see a lot of people PPP practitioners, country governments, development partners, and other MDBs on the line. So we really want to open up for questions or comments. I'll just ask my colleague Bala Diallo, who's our infrastructure specialist and being co-TTL on this work on PPP institutions. Have you got any questions, comments coming in online?
We just have one question from Elena, but before we go to that question, I just wanted to ask Sam Amandip a quick question. So most of our client countries that we have been supporting over those years, and Carrie can confirm it, they're at the very nascent stage of their PPP market. Talking about contract management and we emphasize the role of capacity building. That's why actually one of the practice notes that we disseminated was the the role of the capacity building. And this is coming quite often as we go alongside the other disseminations. I just wanted to know, for a country, I'm not going to name the countries, there for very nascent countries, how can they benefit from those tools? Because when we listen to your presentations, it's very important, but also it might be a little bit complicated when we hear from the first time. So I know we have PPP units from Africa connected. I just wanted to know if you have any experience or any advice how they can use the tool. It can be customized, it's flexible. So this is my question. You know, I'm speaking on behalf of the PPP unit that we have been supporting over the years. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go first. Okay, so this tool is, you know, as we discussed, this tool is encouraged by to all the PPP units or the contracting authorities. However, it need to be customized. It is able to customize to a local institutional framework, right? So so that when it comes to a capacity, we as bank can help the countries to, you know, build the capacity on how to use the tool, and as well as to customize it to their system and the system in the sense both IT as well as the PPP framework. So that's where we can help, and as a bank from the various country institutions which would like to use this tool, and we encourage that.
And I think I'd add, from the perspective of the GI Hub's contract management tool, I think one of the things, I guess, the way in which it's designed to be modular. So there's nothing precluding jurisdiction, particularly, Bailey, to your point, where it is a fairly nascent PPP market. There's nothing stopping jurisdictions from triaging some elements and then, you know, working slowly over time to implement additional elements. And then I think the other aspect of that is where possible, being able to you know, rely on some external support as well. So the Global Infrastructure Hub in the past, as well as developing the tool itself, has often made itself available to a range of jurisdictions in terms of you know, triaging what is maybe the most important sort of reforms or policies or contract management you know, regulations and laws that you put into place first. But I think it's about recognizing that it will be a process. And I think Eleazar made this point that, you know, these things are a sort of process. So it's a matter of triaging over time and taking from those tools those modular elements that you need as you need them.
Thank you.
Respond to the question from Elena on the chat box.
Yes.
In the chat box, Elena's asked for, do the contract management templates vary by sector? Well, we have a standard set of contract management templates, like the mandatory provisions or inclusions, as Sam mentioned a while ago, the areas on step-in rights, termination procedures, but they actually vary not just per sector, but per project. Different across projects. And can we make them available? We have the template available, I think, in our website, but not the specific project management or contract management document. Thank you for your question, Elena.
Thank you.
If there are any other questions, please come in, ask your questions. Just the floor is open now. See a hand raised, Mariam Sue. Please, over to you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to follow up on Bello's question. As she said, many countries are at the early stage of managing PPP contract. So I just want to have some advice from you. What is the main important step when, for instance, there are capacity building needs, but what is the main important step for them to start with in this PPP contract management? Because sometimes there are so many needs that it's often difficult to know what are the most important to start step by step. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. And where are you from?
From Benin, and also yes, you said that it's possible to have some support, but sometimes there are also the issue of the language. In Benin, it's a French-speaking country, so in case of support needed, what should the possibilities to have some support in French for the client? Thank you.
Of course, we try and make our reports and tools available in many languages, but just in English for now. I think on the contract management tool, but our PPP institutions work is all in French and Spanish as well. So maybe pass to the colleagues online on the questions. Perhaps Elizar, maybe from your experience from early days of developing PPP programs, what would your advice be for a more nascent country?
From our experience, before the actual implementation of the project, once we have almost reaching award, we start training the project management, contract management unit of that agency. So we have a capacity building team that puts together a customized template for them. What are the areas they need advice on? What items of the contract they need understanding on? We put together a monitoring plan for them, a contract management monitoring plan for them. That's why it's important that as early as the agency decides to do PPP, they are transaction advisors. They also institutionally start putting together a PPP contract management team. So we can start training them, and we can even have them sit in the procurement process so that they are familiar, or in the negotiation process, so that they are familiar with the contract that they will be monitoring on later. So something like that. The challenge is availability of these guys being ready, being set up already at that stage. There are instances though that it can come in later, especially in instances where it's a local government. So the appointment of people are, can be politicized. It's a challenge, but always we insist that as early as before actual implementation, before actual, right after or towards the award of the project, start building up your project management team, project contract management team. And we are here, the PPP Center. We can sit down with them, train them, and then help them map out a contract management plan, something like that.
Thank you. And next I see Ashok Sakar. I think one of our colleagues has your hand up. Do you want to jump in? Ashok, I see your hands up. Do you want to go ahead? Okay, maybe while we're waiting for Ashok, I see old colleague Bayo Oyewole, who I think is with the ADB now, is online. So you have your hand raised, Bayo.
Yes, thanks very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, great. Thanks, Bayo.
Great. Well, first, I'd like to take the opportunity to congratulate PF and the GIH for the recent merger. I think it's a no-brainer, and it's going to create a powerhouse of PPP knowledge management, which will benefit all developing countries. And we look forward to working closely with the new group. And then I'd like to thank all the presenters for the excellent presentations. They're most useful. These contract management tools they have the potential to transform the way PPP contracts are managed in developing countries. In Africa in particular, PPPs are very challenging for many of our countries. And we hope that this will be a way to be a little bit more strategic and organized in the way we manage PPP contracts in these countries. I have a couple of questions. Are these tools best used from a central point of view, like for instance, one of the presenter from the Philippines talked about their experience from a central PPP unit. In practice, a lot of these PPPs are implemented by implementing agencies like maybe the housing sector or the health sector or the transport sector or whatever, right? Do these tools lend themselves more easily to individual implementing agencies, or do you advise that they're best sort of operated from a central unit? That's the first question. Then, of course, the second question is how can development banks such as the African Development Bank use these tools? I mean, what's the best way in using them to advise our clients? So those are two questions I have. Thanks very much.
So maybe open to the panel some practical questions and some questions on how to maybe work together with ADB.
All right. So on the 3P CMT, it's a practical web-enabled tool, not just guidance, right? So this is definitely, as Bayo has said, projects the owner is the implementing agency or the contracting authority who looks at the day-to-day management of the project. However, there are other stakeholders involved, and this tool allows not only the implementing agency to manage, but the higher authorities to escalate the issues and also to have a wider viewpoint on how the PPPs are performing. So that's where it depends. In some countries, if implementing agency, for example, Ports Authority, if they have say 10 or 20 projects already running, so it's advisable to sit in their server, right? The Ports Authority server, they manage it. Then the central agencies like PPP units and the regulators need to be entangled. And the countries where it's very initially, the centralized units like PPP unit or the PPP center, they generally have the PPP capacity to take over, take hand holding of the implementing agency. So it varies. It depends how a country the PPP framework has been developed. Now, if as from the Philippines has mentioned, it's a capacity building of the implementing agency officials also. Sometimes they have so many responsibilities, they are not dedicated. So it's a dedication. So definitely either it is implementing agency server or the central authority server. All the agencies, all the stakeholders, mainly the implementing agency, need to be there and need to be take over charge to manage this tool.
And maybe a question to Sam and Kerry, perhaps in your research, how have you seen different countries taking a different approach to where the responsibility sits for monitoring contracts?
Yeah. Or I can, I'm happy to go. I think in the case of the Global Infrastructure Hub's contract management tool, to that question around who is most appropriate to use it, I would say it would have value for both. A central PPP unit are going to find some value in it, I think, when it comes to things like how you set up centralized policies or templates or creating processes that you want to be consistent across a jurisdiction. So I think in that sense, the central sort of unit is going to find a lot of value. But there's also a lot of detail and advice around things like day-to-day contract management. And in that case, the procuring authority might tend to find a little bit more value in it. I think in terms of the how the MDBs can sort of use it to assist clients, I think it was Carrie who mentioned before that technical assistance hasn't necessarily tended to focus that much on contract management, and it's more focused on project preparation in the past. So perhaps, and I'd be interested in hearing Carrie's thoughts on this. Actually, maybe that's how MDBs can best engage with these tools, is to use them, from the perspective of technical assistance.
And maybe just to add to that, I mean, I think one of the things that we saw in the research is that although contracting authorities are primarily responsible for contract management, different jurisdictions have piloted different approaches or used different approaches to engage central PPP institutions in different ways. And one of the things that I think we are seeing more of is increasing involvement of central PPP institutions or other governance requirements around contract management that are now being introduced. And that creates touch points where central PPP institutions can engage more closely with contracting authorities. Perhaps that is for something like an approval of an amendment to a contract, or perhaps it's something like regular performance reviews, which I know some jurisdictions have included, or creating a project management team that involves a project management unit that involves a team member from a central PPP institution to help ensure that there's some communication across institutions within a government, and that central PPP institutions who may have more access to the kind of technical assistance that development partners provide are more involved in some of the day-to-day contract management activities that are happening, and therefore can help create that linkage between the types of technical support that are available from development partners and the contracting authorities who may be best able to use it. So I think it'll be quite interesting to watch this space and see how those practices continue to evolve, and particularly around kind of as governance requirements during the contract management stage of PPPs are evolving, to think about how best to support contracting authorities. And there may be a bigger role for PPP, central PPP institutions than there has been historically.
If I may add to that, and based on real experience, in the Philippines, of course, the ideal is that all contracting agents on their own will have built or developed their internal contract management expertise over time, because they'd be the one talking to the private sector. But yes, there's a value, as some said, of a central agency looking and helping and working beside it, because we can bring that experience up and use it for policy, use it for guidelines that can help other agencies, institutions. In the Philippines, for example, the more mature monitoring contract management entity are those who have done several projects. So they've learned lessons, mistakes, of course, but they've somehow strengthened their project monitoring mandate and then capacity building as well. And the new sectors coming up, new into the PPPs, for example, solid waste management, public health facilities. These are really new, and we need to handhold them. That's why we have a more, focused assistance to them. The more mature ones, they can go on and they just come to us for some guidance and help. The other thing, and this is a good point about soft skills, as some mentioned, if there's a central agency and the contracting entity and the private party, some tension there, a central agency monitoring them, helping them, can be the one to, help the relationship management, be the third party platform to have them talk to each other and clarify things. So there are benefits of having a central agency as well, overseeing and then providing some, transfer of lesson from one project to another. And of course, bringing them up to become guidelines, to become templates, and then to add on to the framework and as we amend and expand them as we go along.
Maybe we'll just do a last quick round of questions as we're coming to the end. So maybe Ashok, you can try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. And then just I see someone, 1 second, I see Mitz online has their hand up. So maybe you can come in after Ashok. And there's a comment from Andre in the chat. So maybe we'll take 3 questions together and then ask the panel to respond, as we're just coming up against time. But over to you, Ashok. We can hear you well now.
Yeah, and sorry, I had not even, there was some setting in the phone which was the problem. So it's problems at my end, my apologies. So I work as an infrastructure program leader and a senior energy specialist in the West Bank and Gaza office, the Palestine office in Jerusalem. And I've been also discussing with Ejaz over the last couple of weeks. there is a request from the new government in Palestine to develop a PPP law. So I was wondering whether in terms of these implementation, contracting, management challenges of PPP, can some of those be kind of foreseen and incorporated into a law to make sure that these are well addressed in case there is a problem which arises during the contract management? And the other thing which I wanted to ask is, and I may have missed that part, is that do these contracts also cover like the political risk? Because as you know, Palestine and a few other countries in that region are always subject to a lot of governance and political challenges. And the PPP, obviously, where the private sector is showing interest and investing, gets a little bit risky, at least the risk perception is very high. So is it possible to incorporate some of these political risk challenges and how to address them into the contract as well as the law? Again, I am a novice when it comes to PPP. I know energy and infra very well, but I haven't personally worked on PPP, but we are working on a $20 million risk sharing facility for solar power projects, which is kind of falls within that space. So I would like to really get some advice. And I know Ajaz is helping us. And actually, in fact, I'm meeting him this afternoon again on this topic. But it's a great presentation and really quite a lot of good knowledge for me as an energy person. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ashok. Maybe just go to Mitz if you want to come in and ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. I'm Infra PL based in Kenya, and I wanted to ask a question about how to deal with legacy issues, and especially for an institution like the World Bank. Let's say in the energy sector, we get a lot of questions about, if the past PPAs were signed right, if the this unsolicited proposal, that solicited, unsolicited proposal, are they rightly selected? And, we get a lot of questions from our counterparts about the past problems reflected in the present sector conditions, like high electricity tariff or non-performing contractors and so on. And most of the time, I think our management tended to be very cautious about getting involved because of the obvious, I think, the need for respecting sanctity of contracts. But with the toolkit like this, are we changing our position, or would it make it easier for us to advise clients on legacy issues as well? Or I wanted to understand how we can use those tools for problems of such nature. Thank you.
And then just the last question from Andre. I don't know if you want to speak, Andre, or we'll give you a chance to jump in. Okay, so Andre's comment is around in Indonesia, where they're introducing tolls. I think contract management needs to be implemented by the coordinating authorities. So just some comments on there on the Indonesia experience. So maybe open up to the panel some tricky questions there, particularly around law versus implementation, FCV context, and also legacy issues, which I think the tool is probably very useful to keep monitoring those. So yeah, over to the panel. Anyone want to pick up some of those questions?
I'm happy to start things off while others are gathering their thoughts. I think, Ashok, to your point around developing a PPP law, that's a tough question. I think my answer would be that when you talk about can you use a PPP law to manage risks, I think there's probably are some circumstances where you'll be able to, but given how different each contract is, I'd caution, I guess, on relying too heavily on, managing a lot of risk through black letter law. I think there's potentially other ways in which you can do that. And I think in terms of managing political risk, like you mentioned, you might be looking more at things like guarantees and maybe some other facilities that MDBs or others could potentially provide might be a better way of managing some of those risks. Although I imagine others may have different views on that. And then for the Mitz, your question around Kenya, I think in the case of the GIH contract management tool, it's not really designed necessarily, I don't think, to look at some of those legacy issues. But like I think I mentioned that there was, we do speak to things around, termination and default. And potentially there might be some guidance in there that that might be helpful. That's that final section in the report, and I can provide a link to the chat to that specific section if that would be helpful.
Right. On Andre's question, Andre from Indonesia, so he's asking the contract management best implemented in coordination with the central government. And yes, in the sense that, okay, as we discussed, the contract management is not just about, scheduling or the payments or the just a performance, but it links to the various other things. Many projects have guarantees, and then the issue of contingent liabilities coming up or any other issues. That's where the central government is also needed to be entangled, especially the Ministry of Finance or through the central PPP unit. That's why this 3PCMT tool developed by the World Bank has all those features to have those stakeholders at the central government, including Ministry of Finance or the central PPP unit, and other stakeholders involved, including the PPP regulators. So yes, you are right. It need a coordinated approach to manage the PPP, maybe at an individual level or at the portfolio level. At the portfolio level, it gives a lot of information for the government or the central government how to manage, for example, budget for PPPs or to look at the ceilings, etc. So yes, you're right. So it needs a coordinated approach. Thanks.
If I may add a quick experience from the Philippines, our setup is that the PPP Center just monitors the projects and we get all of this information about exposure. We report our monitoring output to a governing board, which has the following members: Department of Finance, Department of Budget and Management, National Ministry of Planning, even Department of Trade and Industries. All of these key oversight agencies, they are regular recipient of our monitoring report, and we report it to them. So from there, they can, provide guidance, instruction on how this will be addressed at the concerned agency level, like liabilities, budget and management, treasury, etc. So there's a platform for us to gather all of this and then present it to the correct oversight agencies, such as Department of Finance.
Okay, thanks. So I think, Ms. Carey, you have anything? Okay, I think we'll wrap up there. We're just on time. Just firstly to thank all our speakers for really interesting insights, some practical examples and ideas. And I think it was an interesting discussion that I think everybody took a lot out of. So really a very important topic that a lot of people are very interested in, and hopefully we can continue to work with many of you on these issues in your country projects and programs. Just to say in the chat, there's links to many of the documents and tools we've been discussing today. I'm really happy to continue the conversation offline with any of the participants today, but thank you all for joining. It was a big group of people joined from across the world, and very much appreciate all your input and support. So thank you to the speakers and thank you to all our participants. Thanks very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening from Manila.
Good night.
Cheers. Thank you.
Should we leave it?